This young man is Jin Isu, not only handsome but also the heir to the massive fortune of the Hansu Corporation. Born with a silver spoon in his mouth, he was appointed as head of the Strategic Management Division. The butler informed him that there would be a meeting in 2 hours, but Isu didn't care and continued to sleep. The only thing that could truly capture his interest was a rescue mission. Upon receiving a report of a kidnapping, Isu immediately got dressed. The incident took place in a shopping mall, with approximately 30 kidnappers involved. Isu swiftly and flawlessly subdued the kidnappers, successfully rescuing the girl. Afterward, he pressed the Mission Complete button. This was just a game he had created. To satisfy his passion, he didn't hesitate to rent out an entire shopping mall, even risking his life for the thrill. Meanwhile, the violent crime investigation team was pursuing a murder suspect. Behind them, team leader Lee Gang-hyun chased the suspect into a dead end and subdued him using a stun gun. Oh Byung-soo claimed to have no knowledge of the murder, stating that his cellmate had introduced him to the job, but they had perished upon arrival. After analyzing the situation, the team decided to use Byung-soo to lure out the accomplice. On the other side, Isu took all his actors out for a party. When he couldn't find young Hwan, he went searching for him and discovered him about to use drugs. Isu immediately dumped a packet of drugs and threatened to destroy young Hwan's company if he used them again. As they were about to leave, Isu's older brother, Jin Seung-ju, called to inform him of a press conference scheduled for 9 a.m. As he hung up the phone, he noticed that young Hwan was gone. Young Hwan, borrowing a lighter from a passerby, was attacked by the same man he had run into earlier. Isu chased after the man, just as Gang-hyun happened to pass by. At a dead end, the man attacked Isu with a knife. Usually playing only games, this was the first time Isu faced a real-life situation. Using the skills he had honed through his games, he quickly disarmed the attacker and knocked him unconscious. Just then, Gang-hyun arrived and, seeing that Isu was pretending to be a police officer and attacking others, arrested him. It was then revealed that Isu was the youngest son of the Hansu Corporation. Upon hearing the news, his superior arrived and gave Gang-hyun a stern scolding. Isu thought he would be released after Gang-hyun arrived, but he was unjustly thrown into jail. Isu, a law graduate, eloquently recited Gang-hyun's charges, using violence against a suspect, which could result in a sentence of up to 5 years in prison. However, he argued that he was defending himself because he had seen his friend being attacked and had pursued the assailant. However, when young Hwan was called, he denied the incident, claiming that it never happened. Isu suddenly felt thirsty and requested an iced Americano. He then nonchalantly asked how many people were in the police station, stating he would treat them all to drinks before being mercilessly thrown back into jail. Outside, Kyung-jin was gossiping about Isu, the wealthy heir, being arrested. This was overheard by Lee Gi-seok, a reporter from SBC News. It was time for the press conference announcing Jin Myung-chul's candidacy, but Isu hadn't returned. During the interview, the journalist revealed that Isu was in police custody and that the victim was still unconscious. Gang-hyun, releasing Isu, came across the scene where he was hugging several people and sleeping soundly. Isu was then taken to the waiting room, where his father was already seated. Furious, his father slapped him for ruining his press conference and expressed regret for bringing him back. He then decided to disown him, declaring that he only had one son, Jin Seung-ju. Without his money, Isu was nothing. Seung-ju, aware of Isu's reluctance to disgrace his father, acted accordingly. However, he insisted that he hadn't done anything wrong. On Gang-hyun's side, she remembered Isu's words and revisited the crime scene. Finally, she found the knife the attacker had used that night. She then went to the hospital and examined the attacker's fingerprints, discovering that he was Lee Chang-hyun, the accomplice of Byung-soo, the man they had been looking for. The chief and his superiors were baffled and decided to blame Gang-hyun and fire her. However, Jin Seung-ju intervened, finding a way to save face for both the police force and his father. He revealed that Jin Isu had actually been working undercover as a police officer for the past 2 months and that this incident was part of their investigation. Gang-hyun didn't want to cover things up like that, but this time, it was her fault. If the truth came out, it wouldn't just be her who got fired, but it would also affect her colleagues and many others. As the press conference approached, Gang Hyun presented evidence to prove that Isu was an undercover police officer working with them. The reporter, Lee Gi-seok, was reprimanded by his superior. Even if the evidence was a fabrication by the Hansu Corporation and the police force, they could only apologize. Upon seeing Isu return, young Hwon apologized for lying. However, he had taken drugs earlier and couldn't testify. Gang Hyun's team discussed Isu. Kyung-jin was thrilled at the prospect of working with the wealthy heir, but Jun-young believed that a golden spoon like him wouldn't actually dedicate himself to the job. That evening, Isu silently looked at the police uniform he had just received. He recalled the tragic accident that took his mother's life years ago. The next morning, Isu adamantly refused to go to the police station. Seung-ju struggled to find a solution that would satisfy everyone, but ultimately, he had to confess that he had fabricated everything and would resign. As the press conference began, Isu appeared as Seung-ju had predicted. At the police station, everyone was rolling out the red carpet for Isu. He explained that he had been working silently because he didn't want to draw attention, but that his talents would always shine through, as evidenced by his capture of the dangerous criminal they had been searching for so long. After Gang Hyun and her team were introduced, he shook hands with Gang Hyun, expressing hope for a pleasant future collaboration. Seeing that Isu wasn't leaving and was demanding to stay and actually work, everyone was exasperated. Gang Hyun threatened him to stay put and warned him that she wouldn't hesitate to take action if he interfered with her work. She then suggested to her superiors that Isu should be assigned to desk duty, but they responded that if that were the case, they would just come clean and resign. She had no choice but to accept reality. After the meeting, they stepped outside to find that the police station had been transformed into a restaurant. Isu, now dressed in casual clothes, was playing a game. Gang Hyun switched off the electricity, berating him. He retorted that if they had caught the criminal in the first place, there would have been no need for him to intervene. Outside, Jun-young gave everyone 3 minutes to leave or risk being arrested for obstruction of justice. He also declared that no one was needed as a secretary now that they were police officers, so no one would be allowed to follow Isu from now on. Unable to remove Isu or transfer him, Gang Hyun devised a plan to have him leave on his own. She gave him a stack of files to process for the day. Soon after, the chief summoned Gang Hyun. He was writing a report about Isu, who was nonchalantly sipping on a bubble tea. Gang Hyun was helpless. As they returned, they received news of a missing 70-year-old man. The team rushed to assist, and Isu mobilized his entire racing team. One of them quickly found the missing man and brought him back safely. Kyung-jin was impressed by Isu's coolness, but when Gang Hyun discovered that he had used his watch to offer a reward, she forced him to delete the post. The next day, they received notification of a body found at Gang Ha Pier. Gang Hyun summoned everyone, including Isu, to the scene. Upon arrival, she ordered Isu to stay put. He couldn't understand why he was listening to her, wondering if he had been hit in the head during the earlier incident and was behaving abnormally. He then hired a boat and sped off. They discovered that the victim was model Young-in-a. Kyung-jin approached Isu, revealing that he was a fan of his online. Isu thought Gang Hyun was bossy and arrogant, but he honestly admitted that she hated him. Gang Hyun then told Isu to come with her. She explained the realities of police life, hoping to discourage him, but he saw through her attempt. They went to the modeling agency. Gang Hyun asked Isu to find information about Young-in while she spoke to the manager. The manager said Young-in had been there at 8 p.m. the previous night and had no personal life issues aside from the fact that her mother had died 10 days ago. Outside, Isu was chatting with some models when he saw Gang Hyun coming out and quickly followed her. However, she locked the car door and left him behind. After visiting the autopsy site, she returned home with her father. He inquired about the new officer, but Gang Hyun simply thought of him as crazy. While they were eating, her mother mentioned the son of the pharmacy owner. But for Gang Hyun, she would rather catch more criminals than go on dates. After a day of working, Isu was bewildered. He couldn't understand why she had tormented him all day and then left him behind. Young Hwon suggested that they were afraid he would catch another criminal and thus outshine them. Therefore, he needed to achieve a significant victory to crush them. The next day was the day for the autopsy results. Isu arrived early. Gang Hyan warned him that this wasn't a place for everyone, as many faint-hearted people had collapsed there. She then went to find Dr. Jai-won, the pathologist, while Isu approached the body. The sight before him filled him with fear, his heart feeling like it was being squeezed. Gang Hyan walked out and saw him, but Isu claimed he was just joking with her. After examining the body, Jai-won discovered that Young In hadn't died from strangulation or drowning, but from a fracture in the left parietal lobe. The impact was so strong that it caused the skull to indent. The weapon was likely a hammer or a wrench. Based on the angle of the injury, the perpetrator was left-handed. Back at the station, Isu kept thinking about the perpetrator, which amused Gang Hyan. He proposed a deal. If he caught the killer, she couldn't fire him and had to acknowledge him as a police officer. But if he failed, he would disappear from her sight. Back in their office, Jun Young reported that they had identified a suspect. He and Young In had boarded the same boat, and then he had gotten off alone. Isu recognized the suspect as the youngest son of DN Media. Young In had filmed a commercial there, and she was supposed to be replaced by another model. But for some reason, they ended up keeping her. Isu had overheard this from the models, information unknown to the police team. Gang Hyan ignored Jun Young's lead and focused on the owner of the boat. Isu immediately knew where he was and left. Gang Hyan impatiently told Kyung Jin to find the location. With his membership card, Isu gained access to the building and found Chun Tae-sung, the eldest son of the DN Media Corporation. He beat him up for taking the time to get a makeover after committing murder. Two of his bodyguards charged at Isu. Outside, Gang Hyan wanted to enter, but she didn't have a membership card or a search warrant. As she inquired about Isu, she saw him being pushed out by the guards. They were about to fight the bodyguards when another group approached. Isu, an amateur, was quickly subdued. Gang Hyan rushed in to rescue him. The bodyguards charged at them again. This time, Isu and Gang Hyan worked together and beat them all. Chun Tae-sung, seeing this, tried to run away but crashed into a glass door. Since he was only wearing a towel, catching the suspect had to be left to Isu. Back at the station, Tae-sung confessed that he had been about to kiss Young In when she suddenly grabbed his hair and pulled back. Enraged, he strangled her, causing her to faint, and left her there. Gang Hyan ordered Kyung Jin to bring the drug test kit. Tae-sung claimed that his brother, Tae-young, was the one who used the drugs. At that moment, Tae-young arrived, and Tae-sung found drugs on his brother. Following that, Tae-jun, the eldest brother, and his second wife, the mother of Tae-sung and Tae-young, came to the station. Then, the first wife, Tae-jun's mother, also arrived. Suddenly, the police station became a chaotic mess filled with the entire family tree of the DN Media Corporation. Isu looked back at the commotion, and Gang Hyan ordered everyone to leave. Tae-young was arrested for drug use, and Tae-sung was arrested for being the suspected murderer of Young In. The scene shifted to Gang Hyan giving Tae-young a bottle of water, noticing that he was left-handed, matching the description of the perpetrator. Tae-young confessed that he had gone to the boat to use drugs when Young In appeared, looking like a demon. Under the influence, he pushed her into the river. However, Gang Hyan pointed out that Young In hadn't drowned, she had been assaulted. Not long ago, Tae-young had assaulted Yang Jin-seok, who died as a result of Tae-young's drug-induced violence. When Tae-young came to, he couldn't remember anything and called the police saying someone had fainted in front of his house. Gang Hyan speculated that after Tae-young pushed her into the water, Young In managed to climb back on, but then he attacked her again. Isu found something odd. If Tae-sung and Tae-young were arrested, why were Tae-jin and his first wife there? Gang Hyan also noticed a discrepancy. If he killed her while under the influence of drugs, why was the blood cleaned up so thoroughly? Suddenly, Isu thought that Young In might have been murdered on a different boat. When he was on his own boat, he had noticed a scratch on the hull. For a boat that large, it was hard to create such a scratch. Gang Hyan remembered the bruise on Young In's hand. It suggested someone had tried to rescue her, and the bruise occurred when she was dragged back onto the boat. Isu returned to the station to find the stepmother there. She claimed that this was her house because his father was about to send him abroad. Isu finally saw through her facade, realizing she wasn't the good stepmother she pretended to be. He told her to go to the neurology department instead of spending all her time at the beauty salon, since her delusions were a sign of mental illness. She didn't stop, and she started smashing Isu's things. He asked his secretary about the DN Media Corporation, suspecting that this wasn't a simple murder case. The next day, Gang Hyan discovered that Young In had met with T-Jin, the eldest brother, and she went to find him. He said that Young In had invited him for lunch and they had just chatted casually. He also said that she frequently visited the first wife to look for the chairman. When she asked about the chairman, she replied that he was on a business trip, and she was handling company affairs during his absence. Meanwhile, Isu went to see the house and discovered that the chairman of DN Media was in bed, sick. This meant that Young In had been in contact with the chairman and his 3 sons. Kyung Jin returned and had investigated and found out that Young In's mother used to work as the chairman's secretary at DN Media. Isu also reported that the chairman of DN Media was diagnosed with cancer. They were keeping it a secret to prevent their stock prices from plummeting. Over the past 6 months, the 3 sons had been fighting amongst themselves to claim the position of chairman. Yong Jin Seok, who was previously assaulted by T Young, was the one who provided information to T Jun. They had people spy on each other's weaknesses, and this was also why T Young had to go to the boat to use drugs, to avoid being discovered. Gang Hyan suspected that Young In was the chairman's illegitimate child. She had persistently visited the chairman, wanting to obtain samples for a DNA test. After confirming their blood relationship, she was murdered by her stepbrother. Gang Hyan asked the chief for a warrant to search T-Jin's boat, but without evidence, the warrant couldn't be issued. Isu wanted to help her investigate, knowing that the culprit might escape if they didn't act quickly. With their combined efforts, they discovered blood splatter and fingerprints belonging to the perpetrator, Park Jong-wook. He was the secretary of the first wife, Choi Hyun-ju. It was possible that she had orchestrated this, driven by her anger over Young In being the illegitimate child, and took this opportunity to eliminate T-Young. News came in that Jong-wook and Choi Hyun-ju had fled and were registered for departure from the country. The team immediately located them and pursued them. However, they got stuck in traffic. Isu called his secretary to arrange a helicopter for them. They flew directly to the airport and then boarded the couple's car to attack them. As Isu was landing, Gang Hyan couldn't wait any longer and jumped out. She successfully shot out the tires of their car and apprehended them. At the police station, Choi Hyun-ju immediately confessed to her crimes. Isu noticed something unusual in T-Jin's expression when he heard his mother confess. He found the second wife and shared his suspicions. After being persuaded by Isu, she agreed to hand over the audio recording she had secretly made. Gang Hyan was about to let T-Jin leave when Isu sent her a message. She stalled for time to hold T-Jin back. When she couldn't come up with any excuses, Isu returned just in time. He called T-Jin out and played the audio recording, proving his guilt. Finally, the real perpetrator was caught, and Isu had won, so he would officially stay. That night, the 3 of them were going out to dinner. Isu invited them to a restaurant. Kyung Jin wanted to go but was held back by his colleagues and had to decline. Isu called his secretary to announce that he was about to move and would be going to a place not connected to the Hansu Corporation. Seung-ju called and asked to meet Isu. Thinking back to the events at the DN Media Corporation, he reflected on his own situation. He was grateful that Seung-ju hadn't blamed him and had been very kind to him. Seung-ju confessed that he initially disliked Isu, but after seeing his mother constantly yelling at him, he felt pity for him. The next morning, the news about the 5 members of the DN Media family being arrested was published. Isu also received an invitation from No Young Yee's exhibition, titled The Invitation of Death. When he arrived, he discovered that No Young Yee had been murdered. Despite his fear, Isu mustered his courage, approached the body, and used his police badge to seal off the scene. Isu called Gang Hyan to report the news. She and the rest of the team quickly arrived at the scene. After examining the scene, she allowed the guests to leave, concluding that the professor had been murdered 10 hours ago based on the bloodstains. They started their investigation with Du Jun, Professor Young Yee's assistant. He had been at the exhibition with the professor the previous day and returned home at 9 p.m. He arrived at 8 a.m. that morning but didn't notice the body because he was busy arranging the food. After calling the professor and getting no answer, Do-jun went to his house, but no one was home. On his way back to the exhibition hall, he was involved in a car accident, so he didn't arrive until after 10 a.m. Observing Do-jun's behavior, Isu concluded that he was the culprit who murdered Professor Young-yi. At that moment, the director of the exhibition hall, Lee Hwa Young, arrived. Seeing Isu's demeanor, she recognized him as someone familiar. Contrary to Do-jun's statement that the professor was kind and wouldn't have enemies, Hwa Young believed he was a well-known person with a volatile temper. Do-jun had worked for him for 10 years, so now that the professor was gone, he had no one to rely on. Hwa Young recalled that someone had thrown red paint on the main exhibit a week ago, but the professor didn't reprimand him and let him go. Hwa Young had been on a business trip at the time, so she didn't see the attacker. On the professor's body, there was red paint. The two went to the professor's house to inform his wife of the incident. Contrary to their expectations, she didn't show any grief and didn't hesitate to reveal that they had been separated for a long time and that she had spent the previous night with her boyfriend until 2 a.m. Isu found the case intriguing but had to go home first, as he had some errands to run. At the police station, they identified the wife's boyfriend as Jin Kyu. He had a criminal record with 7 convictions for fraud. Kyung-jin retrieved the footage from the camera outside the exhibition hall, revealing that the last person to enter was a woman. Gang Hyan ordered someone to check the professor's insurance, the wife's assets, and the boyfriend's finances. Isu returned to his old house, the one where he used to live with his mother. Go Mi-suk, Gang Hyan's mother, came to visit and introduced herself as the neighborhood head. She gave him her address and told him to visit if he needed anything. The next morning, Gang Hyan went to work and saw a familiar car at the entrance. As Isu stepped out, they both realized they lived nearby. Since her car had broken down, Gang Hyan asked for a ride. They arrived at the exhibition hall and found Do-jun, the assistant, there. When they asked him about the person who caused the disturbance a week ago, he replied that it was a woman and showed them a video recording of the incident. When the person inquired about the painting, the professor claimed that he didn't know anything. He might be talented, but he wasn't smart and would never amount to anything. At that moment, a woman in black entered, threw a bucket of paint at the painting, and cursed at the professor, calling him a murderer. Do-jun recognized the woman as Oh Jong-seon, who worked at the sauna. Upon hearing about Professor Young-yi's murder, she felt he deserved it because he had killed her daughter. She then took them to her house, where there was a painting that looked very similar to the one at the exhibition. Jong-seon stated that the professor had stolen her daughter Yi-xian's painting. She had filed a lawsuit and lodged a complaint, but no one believed her. The professor promised to send her daughter abroad if she dropped the case, but then he countersued them. Afterward, her daughter passed away a year ago, unable to cope with the shock. She had been living with this grief until a week ago when she saw the announcement about the exhibition. Unable to control herself, she went there and threw the paint. On the night of the professor's murder, she had worked at the sauna until midnight before returning home. Gang Hyan recognized the scarf as a gift her daughter had saved up to buy. At the police station, they received information that the professor's wife had received a large life insurance payout upon his death. Meanwhile, Jun Young and Jae-won discovered 3 stab wounds on the victim's body during their examination. The perpetrators seemed hesitant in their actions. Jun Young investigated the wife's boyfriend, Jin Kyu, through his mistress. He learned that Jin Kyu was planning to start a business and had found an investor. Gang Hyan went to find the taxi driver who had driven the woman that night. He said that she had kept her head down so he couldn't see her face clearly, and she hadn't taken her change. In another development, Isu went to buy the painted canvas and saw a painting of a rainstorm. Knowing that Do-jun painted it, he asked him about the painting of a woman lying in a pool of water as if she had died, but Do-jun claimed he didn't know anything about it. The next day, they began investigating Jin Kyu and the wife. She told Gang Hyan to investigate Do-jun, the assistant, as he had the strongest motive. For 10 years, Do-jun had been treated like a slave by the professor. Isu noticed something unusual about the painting and immediately ordered a check. he went to find Du-jun and told him a story. At the same time, Gang Hyan found out that Du-jun's painting had been chosen, but the professor dismissed it, claiming it was a copy. Kyung-jin discovered that the buyer of the orange scarf was Du-jun. In the art gallery, when exposed by I-soo, Du-jun knocked him unconscious. After waking up, Jin I-soo easily subdued Da-jun. Curious about his motive, Da-jun revealed that for the past 10 years, he'd been painting for Young-yi. However, he secretly signed his own name on the paintings, doing chores for Young-yi's wife while witnessing him rise to fame with Da-jun's work. Right before he was about to receive a scholarship, Young-yi accused Da-jun of plagiarism. Despite years of dedication to his dream, he felt crushed by Young-yi, leading him to reveal the truth. I-soo couldn't believe Da-jun's story, questioning how he could live like that for 10 years. As I-soo prepared to leave, Da-jun stabbed himself. Gang Hyan, arriving at that moment, pushed I-soo aside. After Do-jun was taken to the hospital, Gang Hyan wanted to know why I-soo was there. I-soo explained he discovered the signature on Professor No's painting during an X-ray examination and came to investigate. He also admitted to scolding Da-jun, which caused him to self-harm. Gang Hyan, frustrated, saw I-soo as childish and blamed him for escalating the situation. While I-soo regretted his actions, he knew he was responsible. To Gang Hyan, I-soo was an obstacle, and she genuinely desired his disappearance after the election. Returning home, Gang Hyan was immediately criticized by her superiors for her inability to manage I-soo. They didn't want her to continue as team leader, finding her a nuisance and wanting her transferred to another station. Gang Hyan, however, refused, stating she had no reason to leave and that her father had been framed. Her boss brushed off her concerns, telling her to focus on the case. The next morning, Da-jun confessed to Gang Hyan that he had returned and stabbed the professor from behind, then fled in fear. He wanted to apologize and claim the paintings as his own, but when he returned, the professor was already dead. Panicked, he accidentally rammed into another car. To cover his tracks, Da-jun used red paint to shift the blame, leading Yeseon's mother to kill the professor in revenge. However, Gang Hyan theorized that Da-jun had disguised himself as Kyung's son to murder the professor, believing this because he had purchased a scarf. Da-jun refuted this, explaining that it was actually the professor's wife's scarf and he had simply picked it up for her, unaware of its contents. This led Gang Hyan to suspect Hwa Young as the true culprit, believing she had disguised Da-jun as Kyung's son and arranged for a taxi, but Da-jun had stabbed the professor first. When the professor cried for help, Hwa Young provided him with another knife. Since they lacked concrete evidence, they could only investigate Hwa Young further. That night, I-soo questioned his actions that had angered the captain. Kyung-jin explained that they were a team, and all actions required prior reporting for the captain to manage and strategize. I-soo's actions led to Gang Hyan's reprimand from her superiors. Gang Hyan's father was a legendary detective, but he was arrested for bribery a few months before retirement, causing animosity towards Gang Hyan and affecting her reputation. Her youthfulness as a team leader also fueled envy among her peers, adding to the complexities. The perpetrator seemed to be Hwa Young. At the hospital, Da-jun was transferred to a VIP room, a gesture of I-soo's attempt to make amends. I-soo urged Da-jun to confess his actions, avoiding a prison sentence. In response, Da-jun asked if I-soo had found the key on the professor's body. He immediately called and texted Gang Hyan, claiming he had new information, but she ignored him. The next morning, I-soo visited Gang Hyan, revealing he had obtained information from Da-jun. He learned the professor always carried a key to his personal safe. Hwa Young had asked Da-jun to retrieve it, but it was missing from the crime scene. It was likely Hwa Young had taken the key, giving them a lead to investigate her. Later, Gang Hyan confronted Hwa Young, telling her that Da-jun had self-harmed and died that morning. Hwa Young immediately contacted Jin Kyu, asking him to meet at her shop. Hwa Young arrived at the shop to retrieve the assets hidden by the professor, but Gang Hyan apprehended her. Gang Hyan immediately identified Hwa Young's bloody fingerprints on the key. Jin Kyu, terrified, attempted to escape, confessing that Hwa Young murdered the professor. The next day, headlines announced Jin I-soo's contribution to the case. Meanwhile, the mayoral election between Aisu's father and Wang Zhongti was about to commence. Zhongti immediately sought out a journalist, aiming to expose Aisu's secrets. He believed Aisu was Chairman Jin's weak point and wanted the journalist to reveal that Aisu had a secret illegitimate child and that his mother had passed away 3 days before the election. This, he believed, would sway voters in their favor. Hyung-jun passed by and saw Aisu's dying plant. He offered help, learning that Aisu was the same boy from his childhood who had returned. Gang Hyun received a report of a dead body found in Yunbudong. At the scene, she instructed her team to gather information about the victim. After speaking to the victim's caretaker, Gang Hyun learned that he had passed away before she arrived. While he suffered from high blood pressure and arthritis, he was generally healthy and only ventured out to church. He didn't seem to have any enemies. During the investigation, Jae-won found only a piece of rice cake in the victim's throat, no signs of a struggle, and no signs of forced entry, suggesting it might be a simple accident. That evening, the victim's granddaughter sought help from Aisu. The next day, Aisu arrived at the station and believed it to be a murder. The granddaughter stated that her grandfather couldn't eat rice cakes because they were too hard. Furthermore, the Korean national seal had vanished. The team dismissed this, considering it impossible for the seal to be in a civilian's home. Aisu took a photo of the seal and sought out an appraiser to verify its authenticity. The appraiser confirmed its legitimacy and explained that traffickers would blacken them to avoid detection. 20 years ago, Chairman Choi owned one, but he had passed away several years ago. While on the way to the station, Gang Hyun received a report from Jae-won regarding 2 recent deaths in Yunbudong due to rice cake consumption. Upon comparing the rice cake the victim had consumed with the piece found at the scene, Jae-won discovered that it had been cut and disguised. These cases fell under Team 2's jurisdiction. The next morning, Gang Hyun approached Byung-sik, requesting files on cases he handled, but he refused. During a meeting, Aisu informed the team that the appraiser confirmed the disappearance of 73 national seals, with one possibly being in a civilian's home. Combined with the disguised rice cake, Gang Hyun believed it to be a series of murders. However, they lacked further information and could only investigate the victim's neighbors and relatives. They discovered only one camera in the area and that neighbors had reported missing gold and cash. However, when they complained about their loved ones' deaths, the team dismissed it as a simple accident. As they were leaving, they noticed the Yongseong family church logo on the gates of each household. When they arrived at the church, they couldn't get any information from the pastor. Meanwhile, Jae-won discovered a mole on the victim's body that hid a birthmark. Aisu and Gang Hyun visited the accounting office, the only place with records of church donations. The employee claimed that the ledger had been stolen 2 months prior and she had recreated a fake one. Back at the station, Aisu noticed the name Choi Sang-soo and believed he possessed the seal, but didn't report its loss due to fear of legal repercussions. John Yuong returned with evidence of the victim being injected with nicotine. Footage from the camera revealed 2 suspicious individuals, but the poor quality hindered identification and license plate recognition. They learned that the 2 individuals were free photographers at the church. The 2 suspects, Young Bum and Yijun, visited the homes of the victims offering free funeral photography services. After taking photos, they would offer the victims rice cakes or rice wine, causing them to fall asleep. Once unconscious, they would inject nicotine into the victims' bodies and create a staged scene resembling an accidental death. Byung-sik arrived at the station and prohibited the team from investigating these cases. However, Gang Hyun, without relying on his files, found evidence proving the murders were a series of crimes. Their superior arrived, summoned them for a meeting. After reviewing the case, he entrusted the investigation to Gang Hyun. The team, eager to apprehend the suspects, decided to reinvestigate the crime scenes. Aisu sought out Yoon that evening, asking for his help in retrieving the national seal. The next morning, the team ignored Aisu's advice to investigate the seal, leading them to a dead end. After several days, Yoon called Aisu, revealing the seal was going to be auctioned off at 2 a.m. for 1 billion won. Confused about where to find the money, Aisu reassured them he had a plan. They went to the bank where Aisu withdrew 1 billion in cash. The auction was secretly held at a nightclub. Isu took Gang Hyan to buy new clothes to blend in and taught her how to act like a partygoer. When the auction began, they infiltrated the club, purchased the seal, and waited outside. However, they discovered they had been tricked as their movements were tracked. Upon reviewing the security footage, they learned the perpetrators had detected their tracking device and discarded it in another vehicle. The dealer informed them that both buyer and seller remained anonymous, communicating through a dark website. Their identities were concealed, so the dealer couldn't recognize them. Upon their return, Byung-sik reveled in Gang Hyan's team's failure, relishing the opportunity to see her humiliated as criminals remained at large. Reviewing vehicle records, Gang Hyan's team learned that the perpetrators used illegal vehicles for their crimes and carefully avoided cameras. Isu unexpectedly suggested using the dark web to set a trap, highlighting the need for an older individual capable of handling complex situations. Gang Hyan returned home, enlisting her father's help for the case. No one else could fulfill the team's requirements. Her father, however, declined, citing his status as a former police officer. Gang Hyan couldn't believe he refused to clear his name, especially after being unjustly accused. The dealer was about to delete some evidence when Isu arrived and asked her to keep it. He used the dark web to contact the perpetrators, asking them to locate an incense burner for a substantial reward. Cyber investigators arrived, ready to shut down the site. The perpetrators, tempted by the 2 billion won offer, immediately agreed. Isu then informed Gang Hyan that they had taken the bait. When her father refused to cooperate, they staged a failed operation to convince him. Gang Hyan's poor performance prompted her father to concede, stating he would live alone to avoid jeopardizing her mother's safety. Isu booked a trip to Ulungdo for Gang Hyan's mother. Upon her return, she discovered a travel ticket and excitedly asked her sister to join. After her mother left, Gang Hyan gave her father a makeover, transforming him into a 70-year-old man. Since the team needed to stake out Isu's home for several days, he decided to make it a grand party. They installed cameras around the house and prepared snacks for everyone. Isu, however, armed himself with handcuffs. After days of waiting, the two perpetrators arrived at Gang Hyan's house. The team prepared for action, and her father conveniently left the gate unlocked. The two perpetrators, entering the house, noticed the incense burner and invited Hyung-jun to eat rice cakes and drink rice wine. Gang Hyan's team immediately rushed towards them. Just as one perpetrator prepared to inject Hyung-jun with a drug, he suddenly regained consciousness. Gang Hyan's team swarmed them, but the perpetrators threatened to kill Hyung-jun if they didn't drop their weapons. Isu charged forward, attacking one perpetrator, while her father tackled the other. After the two perpetrators were apprehended, Gang Hyan cared for her father. He was conscious because he had spit out the rice wine. Gang Hyan was proud of her father's composure during the arrest. Yoo-jun, in custody, panicked and shifted all the blame onto Young Bum, claiming he was the one who orchestrated everything. After seeing Hyan's report, their superior warned Byung-sik to brace himself for punishment at the upcoming meeting. However, outside the office, Gang Hyan handed the report to Byung-sik, allowing him to submit it as if they had solved the case together. By helping him, she hoped he would return the favor in the future. That evening, young Hwan hastily dragged Isu to meet actress Han Yura, revealing that she was joining their film. Isu confessed to being a fan of hers, but received a message from Gang Hyan about their victory celebration and quickly left. Team 1 joyfully celebrated their triumph, and Gang Hyan's father proudly displayed her photo. Upon returning home, Isu encountered his father, who urged him to move. However, Isu refused to abandon the house where his mother had been abandoned by his father. He didn't want anything to do with his father, yet he was using the Hansu Corporation's influence to become a police officer. To help his father achieve his goal of becoming mayor, Isu was forced to remain silent and fight crime. The next day, Gang Hyan's mother returned from her trip, overjoyed. Her husband's mood improved significantly as well. Chairman Jin was delighted upon seeing news of Isu's success as a police officer, apprehending numerous criminals and donating the long-lost Gajong-era national seal. Meanwhile, two individuals were exploring a house when they discovered a body. Team 1, upon receiving the news, immediately headed to the crime scene. Isu felt a sense of unease when he saw the body posed like a doll. After being encouraged by Gang Hyun, he examined the body and realized it was Choi Sianu, the CEO of SW Soft, who appeared on the cover of a business magazine in March. After questioning the realtor, she stated that she didn't know the victim. The week before, she inspected the apartment and found it empty. Kyung-jin mentioned this was Sianu's first business office, and he started with 3 employees. Isu continuously rattled off facts he knew, irritating Gang Hyun. They went to the victim's house to ask his wife for information. She shared that the company had been struggling lately, causing a lot of chaos. This had kept him up at night, leading him to seek therapy. He had called his wife saying someone was trying to kill him, and then contacted her urging her to run away. Meanwhile, Kyung-jin discovered Sianu's car parked on the side of the road. They continued their investigation, asking Jae-won for information. She found nothing unusual about the body. She had only seen a death caused by dehydration in her 30s, so this was a new experience. The victim's stomach was clean, indicating he hadn't eaten in at least 4 days and had only been dead for a day. Isu found this perplexing, as the crime scene had plenty of water, the door wasn't locked, and he was holding a phone. Gang Hyun's mother was secretly thrilled seeing their growing closeness. As a result, Gang Hyun felt awkward and decided not to carpool with Isu the following day. At the station, Isu asked Gang Hyun if her mother was crushing on him because she had smiled at him. They checked the car's dashcam footage, revealing that Sianu had met someone beforehand. They needed to investigate that person. Young Jin returned and informed them that he had found the last person Sianu had contacted, a psychiatrist named Seo Yukion. Isu and Hyun went to the hospital to find Dr. Seo. Isu inquired about the fees but was rejected by the receptionist. Upon entering Dr. Seo's office, Isu spotted a glass ball that resembled his own. They stated they wanted to ask about Sianu, but Dr. Seo refused to disclose patient information. However, upon hearing Sianu had died from dehydration, she mentioned that in cases of fear, patients might not be able to leave their rooms. She also added that dehydration could occur due to fainting, potentially leading to a coma and death. Sianu had previously been hospitalized for sudden seizures. He had called the doctor 4 days before his death, sounding panicked and claiming someone was trying to kill him. Isu, having watched a movie that lasted over 180 minutes, believed Dr. Seo was the suspect, as most movie villains were psychiatrists. Gang Hyun also felt Dr. Seo seemed to know something about him. Meanwhile, Jun Young visited Sianu's company and learned he had met Cho Sung-gu, the head of client management. Sianu's dashcam footage captured a tense conversation between them, making Jun Young curious about their relationship. An employee revealed that the company was struggling, and Sianu had invested company funds in coins. When the coin value plummeted, Cho Sung-gu discovered the embezzlement and threatened Sianu. When they tracked down his address, they found him dead. His body was already decomposing. Seeing this, Isu felt uneasy and sought help from the secretary. Jae-won, after examining the scene, concluded that the victim was sitting when he was attacked from behind. The killer used a knife to sever the victim's artery, suggesting professionalism. From the blowfly larvae, Jae-won confirmed the victim had been dead for a week, verifying that Cho Sung-gu was murdered 4 days before Sianu's death. Based on gathered information, Jun Young believed Sianu had killed Sung-gu, who had been threatening him. This fear prevented Sianu from leaving his apartment. Hyung Jin found fingerprints on the wallet at the crime scene, identifying them as Hong Yuna's, the second daughter of the MK group. She was Isu's former lover and known for her hot temper. The team wanted to get a statement from Yuna, urging Isu to handle the situation. While Isu would never want to see her again, he reluctantly agreed for work. Upon seeing Isu, Yuna believed he still couldn't forget her. Learning about her upcoming wedding, he wanted to offer condolences to the lucky guy who had won her heart. He questioned her about Sung-gu, given that he had been murdered and her fingerprints were found on the wallet at the scene. Yuna revealed she was about to get married and had been worried about it, leading her to seek therapy. Sung-gu had exploited this vulnerability to blackmail her, forcing her to pay him. Knowing she had also visited a hospital, Isu directly asked if she was the killer, which angered her. Meanwhile, Isu's house was being photographed for a family portrait, but the photographer questioned the lack of Isu's presence. Just then, he arrived home. When asked about his work, Isu claimed it was confidential and refused to disclose details. Seeing Isu back at the house, his mother, a busybody, demanded he leave, leading to a heated exchange where he insulted her age. Upon his return, Isu informed Gang Hyan that Yuna had been blackmailed and had given money to Sunggu. She had also received treatment at Ik Hospital. Gang Hyan revealed that the security at Ik Hospital was handled by Sunggu. He had been extracting patient information for blackmail, potentially leading to his murder by one of the patients. As they argued, Gang Hyan's mother emerged and invited Isu to dinner. The food was very salty, so Gang Hyan added a lot of water for him, but he still couldn't eat. Her mother remarked that they were a good match, but upon learning he was from a wealthy family, she envisioned him as a romance novel character. The following day, they went to Ik Hospital to ask Dr. Seo about Cho Sunggu. Hyan revealed that he was the security guard who had stolen patient information to blackmail them. This revelation shocked the doctor. Hyan hoped she could cooperate with them on the investigation, but Dr. Seo said it was impossible because she was not allowed to disclose patient information. As Hyan left, Isu asked about his frequent dreams of a specific location, wondering if he was ill. Dr. Seo said she needed to examine him to be sure, explaining that his mind could be suppressing something. She immediately contacted Chairman Jin, revealing that Isu might be recovering his memory. Meanwhile, Gang Hyan's mother unexpectedly met the reporter who wanted to investigate Isu's house from 25 years ago. He then sought out Young Jun to inquire about the matter. Knowing it was related to the election, Young Jun refused to speak with him. Back at the station, Hyung Jin found a conversation between the two victims, revealing that they were involved in a USB drive that Sunggu used to blackmail Seonu. Seonu, lacking funds, had given Sunggu access to patient information at Ik Hospital. One of the patients, enraged, killed Sunggu, and a frightened Seonu hid in his apartment. Isu stated that to find the patient, they needed to find the USB drive. When Isu went to Sunggu's apartment to search, he discovered the killer had returned. They fought, and the killer handcuffed Isu before fleeing. Hyan arrived at the lobby just as the killer left. Isu escaped and used an emergency rope to jump to the first floor, chasing after the perpetrator. With a single kick, Isu apprehended the killer. Hyan, concerned about Isu's safety, warned that this could endanger him. Returning to the station, Gang Hyan's mother told her that a reporter had visited, wanting to ask about Isu and his mother's death. Gang Hyan immediately reviewed the old case file, discovering that her mother's death was ruled as drowning in a bathtub. Her father was in charge of the case. Isu was only 7 years old and had been unconscious at the time. This explained why Isu couldn't remember the cause of his mother's death. After identifying the suspect, Gang Hyan went to interview Kim Do-hyung. He had a criminal record for theft, even ripping down the police warning sign to steal things from inside. Isu wondered why he wasn't being interrogated, to which Kyung Jin replied that he needed experience to be allowed to do so. How can you gain experience if you're not allowed to do anything? Isu thought to himself. The thief insisted he didn't kill anyone, claiming he only went there to steal. Just then, his phone rang with a VIP name, causing him to panic and refuse to answer. Isu, unable to bear it anymore, barged in and answered the call, much to Gang Hyan's annoyance. The caller asked him to meet at the usual place for a deal. Isu disguised himself as Do-hyung and went to the meeting point. As they approached the car, they saw a couple in the front seat getting intimate. They apologized and closed the door. Another car then arrived. Isu apprehended the mayoral candidate, Jin Jong-tae, who claimed he didn't know Do-hyung and was simply there by chance. Isu then revealed they had found the USB drive, prompting Jong-tae to ask if they had seen its contents. This further strengthened the belief that he had been blackmailed by Sunggu and had sent someone to kill him. Exhausted, Jong-tae protested, claiming he was busy campaigning and couldn't have been involved. Just then, So-seung arrived and took Jong-tae away, much to Gang Hyan's frustration. Kyung Jin announced they had found alibis for both Do-hyung and Jong-tae. Deadlocked, they needed to find the USB drive to uncover clues. Gang Hyan, exhausted, asked her father if he had been in charge of Isu's mother's case. He admitted that she had been suffering from depression for a long time and had taken sleeping pills to end her life. Isu, who had fainted due to shock and lost his memories, believed his mother had died in a car accident. His father advised his daughter not to get too close to Isu, fearing that he would learn the truth and get hurt. It was his mother's death anniversary. Isu asked for permission to arrive late. Gang Hyun headed to Sung-gu's house for another inspection. Isu went to his mother's grave, proudly telling her he had become a stylish detective. As he spoke, he witnessed a man arguing with security over bringing a portrait into the mausoleum. The security guard said only family members were allowed to enter. Isu had a sudden flash of insight and hurriedly called Gang Hyun, revealing where the victim had hidden the USB. She rushed to him and investigated the object Sung-gu had placed on his father's altar. Isu found the USB drive, and Gang Hyun realized that today was also Isu's mother's death anniversary. Back at the station, they opened the USB, revealing a video of Jong-tae in drag, shocking everyone. Hong Yuna, meanwhile, was seen brutally assaulting dolls. The video list contained prominent figures in politics and economics who were being blackmailed. Isu then called Hong Yuna, discussing her outburst at the hospital and claiming Dr. Seo was the culprit. After his brilliant deduction, he declared that Dr. Seo had used hypnotism to eliminate Sung-gu, leaving the police team speechless. When Park Jun-young objected, Isu had an idea and sent him to meet Dr. Seo to see if she was truly hypnotizing people. Isu returned home to find his uncle waiting for dinner. His uncle, who had been investigating Dr. Seo, revealed that she was a renowned psychiatrist. The next day, Isu took Jun-young to buy clothes, but he disliked everything. After a makeover, Jun-young looked much more presentable. He went to test Dr. Seo's hypnotic abilities, desiring to love the person he hated the most. Upon returning to the police station, he suddenly became affectionate towards Isu, as if he wanted to woo him. Isu was only poked in the hand with a pen, but Jin-young dramatically carried him out for emergency treatment. Punching him didn't wake him up. He kept chasing after Isu. Kyung-jin recorded these actions and added Dr. Seo to the list of prime suspects. Isu visited psychiatrist My Ong-suk to inquire about his student, Seo Yukyung. He remembered her fondly, praising her ability to read people's minds. He noticed a trophy behind him that resembled the one in Dr. Seo's office. He quickly glanced around and asked for a favor. Isu invited Gang Hyun to dinner and explained his plan. He planned to hypnotize Dr. Seo at a romantic garden filled with flowers. He started weaving a story to hypnotize her subtly, but just then, the professor arrived and patted her on the shoulder. Isu had vanished. The professor then began hypnotizing her. Isu returned to his room and saw Jin-young, giving him goosebumps. Jin-young had no idea what was happening, so Kyung-jin replayed the video for him. While they were in pursuit, Dr. Seo appeared and revealed the truth. It turned out Sung-gu had secretly recorded therapy sessions and blackmailed her with the footage. Dr. Seo went to Sung-gu's house and, seizing an opportunity, made him log out. As for Choi Seonu, he had been her patient, so she could easily hypnotize him. He hadn't taken his medication for several days, amplifying his fear. Thirsty, he drank a bottle of water from the storage room, unaware that all the food had been poisoned, and he also logged out. Dr. Seo awoke, having confessed everything. Isu and Gang Hyun went to search Dr. Seo's house and easily found the murder weapon. She had confessed everything under hypnosis. Isu looked at the ceiling, suddenly remembering something. Gang Hyun called out to him, urging him to return. Although she had cleaned the weapon with alcohol, the police still discovered traces of the victim's blood. Before leaving, she warned Gang Hyun to be careful with Isu, as he was a ticking time bomb. Isu returned home to find reporter Jae Seo demanding the USB containing classified videos of powerful individuals. He threatened to expose the truth about Isu's mother if he didn't comply. Isu, realizing he was being blackmailed, decided to destroy the evidence to prevent further threats. He rushed to meet with Congressman Jong-tae, causing him to panic, thinking he was being threatened. Isu stated he had found the USB, but there was nothing on it, assuring him to sleep soundly. He also expressed respect for his hobbies, leaving Jong-tae confused. The next morning, Dr. Seo's lawyer informed Isu that she wanted to meet him immediately. She revealed his recurring dream of an art gallery with a white wall, a woman submerged in water, and a child. She started to hypnotize him, urging him to discover the truth through a doorway in the floor. He saw himself as a child, slowly walking down the stairs and finding his mother unconscious in the bathtub. Isu immediately went to the chairman's office, accusing him of lying and demanding the truth. The chairman claimed he only wanted to protect Isu because he was traumatized and lost his voice that year. He admitted to erasing Isu's memories through hypnosis by Dr. Seo, which is why Isu is the way he is now. Isu grew even angrier at his father for destroying the lives of him and his mother. Isu sat outside the gate in a daze when Gang Hyun arrived and took him out to see the scenery. Gang Hyun then revealed that Isu's mother died from depression, causing Isu to blame himself for not making his mother happy. Gang Hyun then confronted the tabloid writer, demanding he stop writing about Isu's mother, or she would expose his dirty secret relationship with Jong Tae. The scene shifted to Yura, the main actress, who finished filming and said she needed to go out for a while. Director Baek later found her asleep in a sitting position and woke her up, only to see her collapse to the ground, seemingly dead. The director was covered in blood, sending shockwaves through the entire film crew. The police, upon receiving a report of the incident at the Dongbang Hotel filming set, contacted Isu to join the investigation. Isu sat by the window, numb and uninterested in anything. The police questioned the film crew about any conflicts between Yura and the director, but they reported no disagreements. The police examined the scene and found the blood trail originating from the room, concluding it was not a planned event. Yura's manager arrived, demanding to know the situation. He mentioned that Yura had a date and would be home late last night and confirmed that director Kim Young-won had no relationship with her. Director Kim requested to use his phone to answer the interview. Isu reminisced about childhood memories with his mother when director Kim called, asking for help. Isu finally went to work and listened to Gang Hyun's report of the case. Recognizing director Kim as a college friend, he decided to meet him. Kim Young-won insisted he was not the murderer, claiming he played games all night at the film set. Isu returned to his office, convinced that Kim was innocent, and discovered that the production company's director was a different person. He and Gang Hyun went to meet the director, only to find out it was him. He started questioning his employees to uncover the truth. After a while, they suspected Nam Soo, as rumors of their relationship led to attacks from Nam Soo's fans against Yura. Before the incident, they had a big argument and Nam Soo left the film set. After obtaining this information, they went to Nam Soo's house for interrogation. He remained arrogant and indifferent to Yura's murder. At that moment, a beautiful woman came out, claiming she spent the night with Nam Soo. Gang Hyun took her aside for a private conversation. She showed Gang Hyun intimate photos of her with Nam Soo and boasted about having a fantastic night. Jun Young, after examining Yura's body, discovered that the murderer had changed her dress and found evidence proving director Kim's innocence, a fingernail clipping from the perpetrator. Gang Hyun examined Nam Soo but found no scratches. Back at the office, Isu reviewed the security footage and noticed Sang Hai slapping Yura in the room. They went to question Sang Hai, the makeup artist, but she couldn't explain why she slapped Yura. She was known as the Ice Queen for her unfriendliness. Isu asked for Sang Hai's hair from her comb for DNA testing. They then went to her house for a search. Gang Hyun received a message confirming that Sang Hai's hair matched the DNA found under Yura's fingernails. Sang Hai, with meticulously applied makeup, chose a bright yellow dress to meet the detectives. Isu dressed up as a dapper gentleman, welcoming her from the stairs. Sang Hai explained that she slapped Yura because she was asked to do so. Since there was a scene like that coming up, Yura wanted to practice it to avoid being awkward, and the makeup artist saw this. About the DNA on her fingernails, she explained that she saw a wound on Sang Hai's back and proactively applied ointment to it. She mentioned a stalker who had been constantly following Yura, even sneaking into her room, which made her really scared. Sang Hai also recounted her misunderstandings, which had caused her career to continuously flop. After the interrogation, the police went back and read the news online. Almost everyone was attacking Yura, accusing her of bothering Nam Soo, their idol. The next day, the police received an important clue, a video that Yura had watched before she was killed. However, the video was saved on a flash drive that couldn't be accessed. They sent someone to help open the video and monitor Nam-soo. Yura's manager confirmed that Nam-soo had threatened her many times and presented evidence of his harassing text messages, requesting police prosecution. Earlier in the year, Yura had consulted a fortune teller who warned her about a bad year, and unfortunately, she ended up tragically. The police suspected Nam-soo might have hired someone to do this. Gang Hyun wondered why he would go through the trouble of framing Young-won as the perpetrator. Everything now depended on seeing the video Yura had watched, which would hopefully shed some light on the situation. Seung-ju brought dinner over and talked to his brother, encouraging him to forgive their father, saying he was also deeply saddened. Isu insisted on finding out why his mother made the choice she did. The next day, Jun-young announced that Nam-soo was trying to find a lawyer to defend him, preparing for a possible lawsuit. Kyung-jin rushed in, announcing that he had received an email from Cloud. They opened it, but only saw the file name. The video was completely gone. However, the date and time matched the day of the incident and Yura was filming at that time. Isu saw the nickname and remembered a hidden surveillance camera in Yura's room. They accessed the footage from 7M for 3 consecutive days and saw the manager entering Yura's room every day. Suspicion fell on the manager, Sang-tae. They divided the tasks. One group went to find the remaining SD card from Yura's house, while the other went to Sang-tae's. They checked and found that the camera had no memory card, and Sang-tae refused to open the door. Isu suddenly saw an online listing for the sale of the building and went to meet the owner. The owner recognized him as someone from the Hanaseo group and was very respectful. Isu said he wanted to buy the building and see room 301, asking to borrow the master key. He promised to pay immediately if he liked the room, and the owner agreed. He and Gang Hyun went in for inspection and discovered his twisted obsession with Yura. Her posters were everywhere, even the sex doll on the bed had her picture on it. After the inspection, Isu changed his mind about buying the house and told Jun-young to stay close to Sang-tae. The police secretly placed cameras and found Sang-tae sniffing Yura's pajamas, a horrifying sight. Isu went to the film set meeting, where they had to resume filming. For Yura's role, they could only use a body double. Before starting filming, he organized a ceremony for Yura's spirit. The shaman began to cry for Yura and listened to her heart. She shouted, "Do you, the one who harmed her, dare to be present here?" Sang-tae started to feel uneasy as the shaman stared at him. The shaman performed a ritual to summon Yura's spirit to express her feelings. Suddenly, all the candles went out. Sang-tae, with wide eyes, saw Yura standing up weakly and immediately embraced her, apologizing for his actions. He recounted how Yura discovered his perverted acts of sneaking into her room to kiss and hug her pajamas. He had fantasized about marrying her and even bought a house for her. When she refused, he went crazy, grabbed a pair of scissors, and made her log out on the spot. Isu's play was successful, causing his opponent to delusionally confess and reveal the truth. Kyung-jin ran over and praised Isu for doing a great job, but then asked, "Why did all the candles go out?" They looked at each other in silence and then quickly ran away. The tabloid writer asked about changing the victim's clothes, and Sang-tae replied, "I wanted to see her die beautifully." They were speechless. The shaman came over and said that Isu's eyes were filled with sadness. She advised him to stop thinking about his mother because she was now free from the suffering of life. She said that for his mother to rest in peace, he shouldn't keep calling her name in his subconscious mind. She also reassured him that he would eventually find the answers he had been seeking. After the truth was revealed, Yura's fans were deeply saddened. The police returned Yura's phone to her father. Nam-soo pulled Gang Hyun aside and begged her to keep his secret of stalking Yura over the past period. He said if it was exposed, he would be done for. Gang Hyun said that was none of her business, but Sang-hae jumped in and yelled, "He's been insulting Yura online, and he's not going to apologize." She slapped him in front of hundreds of reporters who were taking photos of them. She demanded he clarify the truth or she would do it for him. Everything settled down, but Gang Hyun wondered why Young-won was sleeping at the film set. Isu went to the prison and requested to have Young-won released and sent to rehab. Young-won revealed his true nature, admitting that he had been hanging out with Isu because he was rich. Isu said. Yeah, I know. I just felt lonely back then, so I hung out with you. As he walked out, he saw Gang Hyun waiting for him, and she drove him home. On the way, she comforted him and encouraged him to accept his mother's situation. Isu returned to his beloved house, filled with childhood memories of his mother. He embraced the hypnosis ball and went to sleep, hoping to see his mother in his dreams. Gang Hyun went home and hugged her mother, despite her nagging. The next day, she woke up to a call from the community manager, Oh Ryan, named Lee Seong-guk. He said he wanted to meet with her privately to tell her the truth. As she was about to leave, she was ambushed and logged out on the spot. Gang Hyun waited, but Lee Song-wook never arrived. She had no idea that he had been murdered by the Orion group. The next morning, Gang Hyun received news about a body found by the river. She went to the scene and saw a tattoo on the victim that was related to the Orion group. This tattoo strongly resembled the one from the case involving her father a year ago, so Gang Hyun paid special attention. She went to the victim's home to investigate. While there, she learned that the victim, Dong-soo, was a well-behaved person, but because of his involvement with the cult, this unfortunate incident happened. His mother gave Gang Hyun a pamphlet about the group to examine. The group was essentially a gang, and the victim's sister had infiltrated it to gather information. However, after hearing that her brother had drowned, she couldn't believe her ears. She told Gang Hyun that her brother was a swimming pool lifeguard and had swum across the Han River 4 times, so drowning was impossible. She immediately agreed to an autopsy. At the same time, the captain, On, discovered that the manager, Lee Song-wook, had died by jumping out of a building and committing suicide. After checking the victim's phone, Captain On discovered that Gang Hyun was a contact. She was summoned to the police station to explain this. Upon entering the office, she was interrogated by Captain On and his boss about contacting Lee Song-wook. Before she could understand what was happening, she learned of his death. At that moment, the chief walked in and somehow knew about Lee Song-wook's death, even though he hadn't received a report. This made Gang Hyun suspicious, and she questioned the chief, who was angered by her attitude and suspended her for a week. He then instructed Captain On to keep the case details from Gang Hyun. As she walked outside, she met Jin Yi-soo, who looked at her curiously, wondering what was wrong. However, Gang Hyun said she was fine and left. She went to see Captain On and asked him to help by allowing her to see the case files and Lee Song-wook's suicide note. Out of respect for their colleague and understanding of her personality, Captain On agreed. With this information, she went to find the victim's wife. This made Jin Yi-soo curious, and he asked his colleagues about the case Gang Hyun was investigating. Then, he went to see the chief, hoping to gather some information. The chief treated him like a treasure, being incredibly friendly and welcoming because Jin Yi-soo's father was about to become mayor, making him highly respected. Returning to Gang Hyun, she met Lee Song-wook's wife to ask about him. However, the wife was both sorrowful and resentful of Gang Hyun because she had contacted her husband numerous times, causing disturbances. Gang Hyun was unable to gather any information. She went home and reviewed the case files from her father's case years ago. Coincidentally, all victims had written in their wills that they didn't want an autopsy. At the same time, Jae-soo was at home, researching Gang Hyun's father's case. He then went to comfort her, saying he believed that there were still many mysteries surrounding the investigation of her father's case. Jae-soo said he trusted her and would definitely stand by her side. The next day, because of her suspension, she had no choice but to go out and have some fun. This left only Park Jun-young and Jae-soo at the police station. At that moment, the autopsy results came in, and they went to review them. The doctor concluded that the victim had indeed drowned, but strangely, if that was the case, he should have had waterlogged lungs. This meant that the victim died elsewhere and was transported to the river to mislead the investigation. Jae-soo realized that this wasn't an ordinary case, and it could be related to Gang Hyun's father's case, so he rushed back to review the details. There, he held Lee Song-wook's suicide note and examined it for a while. Unexpectedly, Jae-soo noticed something unusual about the letter and pointed it out to everyone. After reading the letters written diagonally and combining them, they discovered a message that clearly stated, "Do an autopsy." Captain On and Park Jun-young immediately went to Lee Song-wook's wife to ask for permission to investigate and perform an autopsy, but she refused. She said that the Orion group highly valued the body and wouldn't agree to an autopsy. Meanwhile, Jae-soo, with the help of Uncle Choi, learned that to have dinner with the chairman of the Orion Meditation Society, it would cost 100 million won, and his true identity wouldn't be revealed. Hearing this, Jae-soo looked for another way in. He rode a large motorcycle to the Orion meditation class to attract attention and find the leader, Bori. At the same time, Gang Hyun also registered for a meditation class there to find clues. Of course, she disguised herself with a different identity. Everyone who joined the class had their phones confiscated to cut off contact with the outside world, and then they wrote down their wishes while attending. Meanwhile, Jae-soo was invited by Bori to his office for a conversation. Jae-soo didn't beat around the bush and talked about Lee Song-wook's death, but Bori remained calm and unafraid, saying he was sorry about the situation. He then talked about his past, saying he grew up in an orphanage and lived a difficult life. Seeing children who had homes and parents made him envious to the point he thought about dying. However, he realized that he had lived 5 lifetimes, so he had to live and contribute by spreading good deeds to help those who were desperate. That's why he founded the Orion Society, but there were people who didn't understand the society's purpose and chose death. He then subtly pointed out that Jae-soo had lost his mother, but luckily he was still sane and didn't dwell on it. At the same time, Gang Hyun discovered that to meet Bori, she had to become a manager. Everyone there was well fed and slept soundly because they were given sleeping pills mixed in their drinks. Seeing her roommate in a daze, she couldn't stand it anymore and decided to sneak into Bori's room. She searched for information around the room, not forgetting to place a camera to monitor it. Suddenly, she heard footsteps approaching, and Gang Hyun had no choice but to take action. But it turned out to be Jae-soo. They both agreed that the organization was not normal, but Gang Hyun didn't want Jae-soo to get involved. However, Jae-soo said he wanted to help her and would join her. In another room, Bori was talking to Chief Sung-gu. They both knew that Jae-soo was involved in the case and wanted to keep an eye on him. Jae-soo and Gang Hyun were approached by someone, leading them to believe they were about to die. Luckily, Jae-soo was quick-witted and said he was hungry, using this to distract the guard and escape to find food. Gang Hyun successfully left as well, but she was unaware that she had been noticed by the manager. Jae-soo returned to his room and sent Bori's fingerprints to Uncle Choi, who then confirmed his true identity with the police. They now knew that Gang Hyun and Jae-soo were undercover in the group investigating. Immediately, they researched Bori's information and discovered his real name was Shin Woo-hak, with 3 prior convictions for fraud, confirming the danger faced by the 2 undercover officers. Meanwhile, news about the victim Lee Song-wook was aired on TV. This was the same man who had come to their house years ago and left a box of money. Gang Hyun's parents saw the news but couldn't reach their daughter, causing them to worry. Gang Hyun's father went to her room to check for any information. He saw his police uniform and a pile of documents related to his old cases, fearing that his daughter was determined to investigate and was in danger. He immediately went out to meet Park Chan-gun. At the same time, the chief was urging Chan-gun to wrap up the case quickly, saying he seemed overly concerned about it, making him uneasy. However, he changed the topic, saying he didn't want the case to have a wide impact and wanted to close it quickly. Back in his office, Park Chan-gun was startled to see Lee Hyung-jun there. He came to inquire about his daughter, but Chan-gun couldn't reveal anything because of the nature of his work and asked him to leave. As he walked out, Gang Hyun's father met Jun-young and learned that his daughter had joined the Orion Society. He asked him to protect her safety. Jun-young returned to his office and met the journalist, who gave him an article about Bori's case. After the accident, he started spreading the myth of his reincarnation. He had tricked people into joining the group, and 12 people had died. He then said his own people were secretly working as informants in the society, and this person was the Orion Society's manager, Kim Jong-yeon. There, she pulled Gang Hyun aside for a conversation and revealed her identity. Gang Hyun then realized that she and Jae-soo weren't the only undercover investigators. Kim Jong-yeon told her that Lee Song-wook and boss Bori met through a multi-level marketing company. They then established the Orion Society and proclaimed their reincarnation to the members. Using his multi-level marketing skills, he skillfully gained the trust of the members and then used them to do good deeds at nursing homes. This seemingly good deed was actually a cruel trick he created to attract wealthy elderly people. He then made them voluntarily donate all their money in exchange for a peaceful death, believing that their wealth would be passed on to Bori in the next life. The reporter, Kim, also said that Gang Hyeon was being watched and advised her to leave quickly to avoid danger. But she refused to change her mind and said she would stay and investigate to save the people here before they were led astray. At the same time, the two police officers, Park and Choi Kyung-jin, went to the hospital where Bori was being treated to ask about his accident. Captain On went to the beauty clinic where Bori had been treated to investigate. Surprisingly, the two police officers investigating at the hospital found out that the accident never happened and the victim survived. It turned out that the person who was hit and died that day was someone else, and the person who caused the accident was actually Bori. Meanwhile, at the beauty clinic, they also confirmed that Bori had been there for a face change and was planning to have a major surgery the next day. Captain An immediately called Park and Choi Kyung-jin to inform them. Back at the Meditation Society, Gang Hyeon had found important information and wanted Jae-soo to relay it outside. She said that at 9 and the next morning, someone needed to come because that's when Bori would administer poison to 7 people in the group. Outside, Park Jun-young and Choi Jin returned to Lee Song-wook's wife's house to persuade her to provide more information and allow an autopsy. They told her there was no such thing as reincarnation and presented the evidence of the accident. At this point, the wife learned about her husband's criminal record and agreed to sign the document. Bori noticed that the new member list had been torn up, so he immediately took the reporter, Kim, hostage. Gang Hyeon witnessed this and returned to her real identity, using her badge to search Bori's room. Jae-soo arrived to help her deal with the guards, but they couldn't defeat the most formidable guard, Bori's right-hand man. With one punch and one kick, they were both knocked unconscious. When they woke up, the situation was worse. They were tied up, surrounded by Bori's henchmen. Bori asked why they had come to cause trouble and then reminded Gang Hyeon about her father's case, saying he would deal with her. However, Jae-soo confidently said that there was a drone in the sky recording everything, so everyone would know what they were doing. This was Jae-soo's way of relaying information to the outside world, but Bori laughed it off. He pressed a button under the table, and they both fell into a water pit. This was how he killed his victims, by drowning. Luckily, they managed to untie each other, but water began to fill the pit. Gang Hyeon couldn't swim, making her even more panicked. Jae-soo quickly calmed her down and helped her stabilize. Outside, Uncle Choi brought the video of them in danger to the police station. Despite not having a warrant, they immediately deployed to rescue Gang Hyeon and Jae-soo. The water level continued to rise. Jae-soo tried to break the drainage pipe, but nothing worked. Gang Hyeon started to choke on the water and fell unconscious. The police arrived just as Bori and his henchmen were about to escape. They split into 2 teams to rescue Gang Hyeon and Jae-soo. Inside, the reporter, Kim, was rescued, but she didn't know where the 2 were. Then, she heard their voices from below. Following the sound, the police shattered the water pipe to stop the water flow, temporarily saving them. Jun-young went out and asked Bori about the exit for Gang Hyeon and Jae-soo, but he pretended not to know. After a punch from the police, he confessed and led them to save them. As they came out, Gang Hyeon, hearing that Bori had been arrested, cried in joy. The case she had been pursuing for a year had finally found justice. She personally put handcuffs on Bori to prepare for his trial. Her parents came running, both happy and worried about their daughter. This case also revealed another shocking truth. They found a device on Lee Song-wook's body, a USB drive, which was given to Captain On. When they opened it, there was evidence about the Orion Group's major case and a secret about the evil chief. He had accepted bribes, and it was Gang Hyeon's father who had been framed as the bribe taker. He was watching the news when Captain On and the police arrived to arrest him. With the indictment read, he would certainly face justice behind bars. Meanwhile, Jae-soo, despite having just gone through a dangerous investigation that almost cost him his life, calmly went out to eat with Park Jun-young. He thanked him for the case, saying that his reckless and ridiculous tactics had helped uncover many things and catch the evil villain. Jaisu was happy to know that Gang Hyan and Jeonyang were just close friends and not romantically involved, giving him a chance to woo her. Gang Hyan was surrounded by her loving family after a busy period and even visited her ancestors. Because of this, her father was exonerated and reinstated as a police officer. Everyone came to his reinstatement ceremony, joyfully welcoming his return. However, this peace couldn't last long. The scene shifted to a man jumping into the mansion of Jaisu's father and dying there. However, the mayoral election was only a week away. Jaisu's father was doing exceptionally well, and the mayoral seat was almost guaranteed. What was going on with this incident? Jang Myung-chol's wife discovered the event and called the police. Gang Hyan invited Jaisu to go, and he didn't know it was his father's house until they arrived. However, he was reassured because he didn't recognize the deceased man. They were just confused about why he would climb into the house and commit suicide. After examining the scene, they found that the man had arrived there injured. Back in the house, Gang Hyan asked Jaisu's father's wife if she knew anything, but she only shook her head. Jaisu noticed that her expression was unnatural and became suspicious. However, they didn't have any further information to confirm their suspicions and returned to the police station to investigate. By reviewing the neighbors' surveillance footage, they saw the man's actions. At the same time, the victim's identity was confirmed. He was Han De-hoon, 59 years old, with no criminal record. He had recently been reported missing. Gang Hyan and Jaisu went to the victim's home to meet his wife. However, after hearing about her husband's death, she wasn't surprised, which struck Jaisu and Gang Hyan as odd. The wife then revealed her husband's past. He had been hardworking and trying to make a living, but luck was not on his side, and he only experienced failures. As a result, he turned to gambling and fell into debt. This led to him being chased and beaten many times, and he had run away from home for 6 months. Jaisu confirmed with the wife that Han De-hoon had no connection to his father's company and was relieved. They both left. That evening, Jaisu's father was the focus of the press. He didn't hesitate to speak out and said that if the incident was related to his family, he would take responsibility. He went into the house and asked his wife if she knew anything about this, but she said she was completely unaware. It was no use asking the wife, who was addicted to alcohol, so he went to his eldest son. However, he said he didn't know why this was happening. Meanwhile, the team found footage from the victim's camera and discovered the identity of the person he was with, a wanted fugitive named Wang Sik. According to forensic analysis, the victim had been severely beaten before his death. This correlated with the fact that he was in debt and would inevitably get beaten up by debt collectors. Han De-hoon died from a stab wound to his stomach. Jaisu and Gang Hyan went to the hotel where Wang Sik was hiding. It didn't take much effort to arrest him and bring him to the police station for interrogation. However, when he heard about Han De-hoon's death, he was surprised and said he wasn't the culprit. He explained that the knife found in his bag was meant to intimidate debtors. He was also in debt and worked for a debt collection agency to pay his debts. He insisted he didn't kill Han De-hoon because he hadn't met him that day. He was captured by a group of people and attacked before he could meet Han De-hoon. Jaisu had a feeling that Wang Sik wasn't the one who did it. The victim's phone was examined, and surprisingly, the last call he made was to Jaisu's brother. Jaisu went to meet his brother to ask about it. Seung-ju said he didn't know the man, but Jaisu pointed out that the last call was to him. Seung-ju then said that he had met many people at his father's book launch, and he might have given his business card to this man without remembering. He then told Jaisu to trust him. However, Jaisu was now a police officer and couldn't ignore any detail because of his familial ties. He went to gather data from the book launch event. Because of this, the reporters began to pay attention to Jaisu. They called him a love child and asked about the case, causing him great frustration. Gang Hyan took him out for a walk to cheer him up. The next day, good news arrived at the police station. Choi Kyung-jin had found the person who followed the victim's car that day. Upon closer inspection, Jaisu recognized the driver as the perpetrator of 7 assault cases. They went to his house to watch and follow him. They saw him making a deal with a mysterious person and approached, intending to apprehend them. But they were spotted and ran away. Gang Hyan and Kyung Jin quickly caught the man and discovered another victim, a woman, in the trunk. Jai Soo also caught up and apprehended the mysterious person. But when he took off his hat, he was stunned to see it was his brother. Soo couldn't believe his eyes, seeing his brother, who always told him to trust him, standing before him, arrested. Police arrived to handle the scene. The woman in the red dress was taken to the hospital, and Hyun-bi was taken to the police station for questioning. At the station, Soo wanted to question his brother first, while Hyan would interrogate Choi Hyun-bi. Choi denied knowing Han Di-hoon. Hyan presented a series of CCTV evidence showing Choi's actions from chasing the victim to killing him. Choi continued to pretend he didn't know Han and asked, "So he's dead?" Hyan presented evidence of the rope used to strangle the victim that Choi left behind at the scene, saying they would test the DNA. Choi remained calm and blamed the police for secretly taking his DNA sample while he was eating, saying he would report them to higher authorities. This showed that he understood the law and had prepared for this beforehand. In the next room, Soo was questioning his brother, Jung-ju, about why he was at the scene with Choi and who the woman found in the trunk was. Jung-ju was furious that his brother didn't trust him and was interrogating him aggressively. Jung-ju's lawyer arrived, and Soo had to leave without getting any answers. Soo then showed Hyan the footage from the bar where Jung-ju had a confrontation with Han. Only then did Soo present this evidence, causing Hyan to question his impartiality and forcing him to remove him from the case. However, Soo, more than anyone else, wanted to know the truth and would uncover it. Captain Park arrived to get an update on the situation and handle the case. After working with Jung-ju's lawyer, he was no longer considered a suspect but a witness. He met with the suspect because of their social connections, as the incident occurred in his territory. Jung-ju explained that he met the victim for the first time at a house party. They had exchanged a few words, introducing and greeting each other. Later, he saw the man grabbing his mother's hand and rushed to protect her, chasing the man away. He then heard that the man had died in his house. Upon further questioning, Jung-ju recounted his mother's affair. Han was his senior, and they had met a few years ago. Han had been following them and knew about Jung-ju's mother's affair, so he blackmailed her. Although Jung-ju had given him everything he asked for, he demanded more when he heard about Jung-ju's father running for office. He even kidnapped a friend of Jung-ju's mother, which is why he was at the scene the previous night. Jung-ju would do anything to protect his family, even if it meant risking his own safety, causing Soo to be moved. The woman who was kidnapped was very close to Jung-ju's mother. Hee-ya was hospitalized due to the shock and would be questioned later. The lawyer requested to stop the interrogation and bring his client back. As they walked out, Soo and his brother met but felt awkward. In the next room, Choi's lawyer was present to talk to him. It was unclear what they discussed. Kyung Jin informed Hyan that the kidnapped woman was the owner of an adult film production company. Jun Young immediately went to the hospital to visit her. He learned that Han had blackmailed Hee-ya not once but many times. Hee-ya was scared and asked her friend, the woman, to deal with Han. She went to Choi and asked him to take care of Han for a large sum of money. However, things didn't go as planned, and Han died soon after. She went to find Choi, but he threatened her. He knew he was working for the chairman's wife and received only 5 million won for the job, so he demanded more and then kidnapped her. She also mentioned another accomplice of Choi, so Jun Young quickly called Hyan to find this person's information. Soo went back to ask Uncle Choi if he knew about Jung-ju's mother's affair. He said he didn't know about the affair but didn't know about the deceased Han. However, his expression seemed like he was hiding something. In the prison visiting room, Choi talked to his lawyer about someone who was leaving the country that day, possibly an accomplice. Later, the lawyer informed Hyan's team that Choi wanted to confess. Hyan and Soo took over the interrogation. Choi admitted that Mrs. Oh had asked him to deal with someone. He tricked the man into meeting him in the mountains and attacked him. Han begged for his life and promised Choi 100 million won. He said that the secret of the chairman's wife was the evidence of her affair. Choi realized this was a golden opportunity and didn't want to share it with anyone, so he eliminated Han. Han managed to escape and was found by someone nearby. When asked about Choi's accomplice, he denied knowing anyone. However, Hyun knew that the accomplice was Hyun Tae, who had fled to the Philippines that morning. Choi claimed to be the sole perpetrator of the crime, took a pen and paper, and drew the location where he hid the murder weapon. Kyung Jin and Jun Young then found the knife in the designated spot. Captain Park wanted to send the knife for forensic examination and close the case, but Hyun believed that Choi suddenly confessing meant someone was behind the scenes ordering him to do so. That night, Hyun's entire police team went out to celebrate the case closing, but no one was truly happy. Meanwhile, Jung-ju recalled his conversation with Choi. It turned out they met that night to discuss the ransom for rescuing Mrs. Oh. He told Choi to take the money and leave for another country, but Choi burned a piece of paper, the content of which was unknown. Later, the police arrived to surround and arrest them, as had happened. As for Chairman Jin Myung-chul, after the scandal, citizens gathered for a fierce protest demanding his resignation. He returned to the company and learned that the case was closed, so he wanted to review the files. Back at the bar, Hyun was drinking heavily. The case was closed, and there was nothing more he could do without concrete evidence. He returned home and was invited by his father for a few more drinks to drown his sorrows. They talked about the life of a police officer. Some cases close without clear results, but if the investigator doesn't forget it, the case will never truly be over. He asked Interpol to look for Choi's accomplice in the Philippines. At the hospital, when Jung-ju's mother woke up, he immediately asked her about the man named Han. He remembered that she had mentioned him while drunk and was sure she had ordered his death. His mother then recounted that Han had approached their family in the past because he knew they were wealthy. He threatened and blackmailed Jung-ju using his mother, forcing her to do what he said. But Jung-ju learned the truth that his father wasn't Jin Myung-chul. The paper that Han burned was the DNA test results confirming that Jung-ju and Han were blood relatives. His mother wanted him to forget about this truth and end it all. But this was only the beginning for the mother and son. At the police station, Isu received a box of belongings left by Han. He opened it and found many childhood photos of Jung-ju. He found a picture that said, "My son has grown so much, and he looks like me." Isu realized the truth. Jung-ju wasn't Myung-chul's son. The next morning, Isu went to the hospital to meet his stepmother. He directly asked her if she was the one who ordered Han's death. He presented his arguments and evidence, revealing that Han was Jung-ju's biological father, causing his stepmother to become terrified. He said that with this evidence, he would reopen the investigation, so she knelt and begged him to keep it a secret and protect her stepson, Jung-ju. But Isu didn't consider them family and left, ignoring her pleas. When he returned home, he met his brother, and they were holding the ball they used to play with when they were kids. At the company, Uncle Choi reported to Myung-chul that a large amount of money had been transferred from Jung-ju's account to foreign countries. It turned out that Myung-chul had known that Jung-ju wasn't his biological son but Han's. He also believed that Jung-ju knew who the culprit was. He decided to make Jung-ju pay and remove him from the position of CEO. At the police station, Isu wrote a resignation letter. Hyun arrived at the same time, so Isu submitted his resignation. He wasn't the kind of person who could be a good police officer, so he wanted to give up before Hyun could express his disappointment. Myung-chul held a press conference to apologize to all the citizens and announced his withdrawal from the mayoral race. He took full responsibility for the incident that occurred at his home and bowed in apology to everyone. At home, Isu found a secret compartment in the stairwell where his mother had hidden many bottles of medication. He suddenly remembered seeing his mother take a lot of medication when he was younger and being forbidden from touching it. He had stolen some medication once and hidden it in this secret compartment. Not wanting his mother to take the medication, he used candy to replace it. Isu also remembered what Hyun had said about his mother suffering from depression due to an overdose on sleeping pills. Looking back, the date of the prescription coincided with the day his mother died. Isu immediately went to a... When he opened the door, Myung-chul was there. He asked why Myung-chul had erased his memories. He asked why his mother had died when she hadn't taken an overdose. He had hidden all of her medication, proving that she hadn't committed suicide. It's unknown what they said to each other, but it's clear that Myung-chul logged out of this world after drinking a whole bottle of poison. The next morning, the forensics team arrived at the scene to examine Myung-chul's death and collect evidence to investigate the cause of death. Isu returned to the office and reviewed the investigation of his mother's suicide in the bathtub years ago to see if he could find any clues. He told Hyun about his suspicions that his mother's death wasn't a suicide and asked her to help him investigate. The Seoul City Police Department informed Isu that his father had died and that the preliminary investigation indicated he had committed suicide around midnight the previous day. Jung-jun received news of Myung-chul's death and immediately went to the funeral home to get information. Hee-ya at the hospital was shocked to hear that her husband had passed away. At the funeral that day, Hee-ya angrily blamed Isu for her husband's death. Jung-ju stopped her and had someone take her back to the hospital to avoid further complications. The funeral was somber, and many officials attended to pay their respects, including Isu's colleagues from the police department. Afterward, the two brothers sat down to talk. Jung-ju wanted to ask his brother why he had gone to see their father the previous night, but Isu didn't want to reveal his investigation into his mother's death, so he avoided the topic. That night, Isu returned to the old house. Looking at the things left behind by his father, memories of the past came flooding back. Reading his father's final letter, he finally understood things that his father had said before he died, but which he hadn't understood. In the office, Hyun and her colleagues were wondering why Chairman Jin had committed suicide when Hyun suddenly noticed something unusual. She remembered Isu telling her that his mother's death wasn't a suicide, so she rushed to the forensic hospital to find more clues. However, her colleague didn't find anything unusual. Jin Myung-chul's lawyer announced the will, which included many shares of the company and a hefty amount of money in bank accounts, but he didn't announce who would receive it. Isu didn't care about this and left to let his brother Jung-ju handle it. The lawyer told Uncle Kim that he didn't understand why, before the chairman's death, he had called him and asked him to revise the will. Hyun continued to dig into Isu's mother's case to find clues, wondering how his mother could have overdosed on sleeping pills without any pill bottles around. It was the same as the chairman's suicide. There were suspicious circumstances. She suspected that someone had secretly put poison in his wine. Isu went to see Hyun and wanted to talk about many things, but seeing his dejected state, Hyun invited him to dinner. You need to eat to live, so they ate a full meal of rice and soup and then continued their work. Isu recounted his last conversation with his father. He had asked him about his mother's death to see if he was involved. His father had poured him a glass of wine, and a father wouldn't put poison in his son's drink to harm him. So, it was possible that he had a guilty conscience about something that caused Isu's mother's death and had committed suicide out of remorse. Hyun also revealed some clues she found in Isu's mother's suicide case years ago. There were no sleeping pills around her. She asked him to remember if anyone had come to the house that day to help him recover his memories. To help him get his memories back, Hyun would continue to work with him and reinstate his job. She hadn't submitted his resignation letter yet. Hyun called to inform Uncle Kim about the new direction of the investigation, suspecting any kind of mental disorder. The two young officers, Jun Young and Kyung Jin, went to the villa to check the situation. The security cameras there weren't working, and the villa had been empty for a long time. Isu went to see Seo and asked her to recover his memory of the day his mother died. He would provide her with some footage she was interested in to persuade her to help. Then, Seo put Isu to sleep and took him back to the day his mother had the accident. He saw his mother opening the door and then suddenly collapsing. Isu opened his eyes and seemed to recognize who it was. In the police station, Hyun was putting together clues for the case when Jun Young returned and reported that a third person might have snuck into the villa on the day of the murder. If this was true, the person who snuck in must have known the place very well and not been suspected by the chairman. Looking at the picture of the woman on the board, Hyun said it was Isu's mother, and her case 25 years ago was similar to Chairman Jin's case now. The biggest beneficiaries of these two cases were his stepmother Hee-ya and the second person, Jung-ju. At that moment, Isu returned and revealed the truth. The person who came to his house 25 years ago on the day his mother died was his stepmother, Hee-ya. Isu went to tell Uncle Kim everything about the day his mother died, how Hee-ya had come to the house, and that he had discovered Jung-ju was Han Di-hun's son, and that Chairman Jin probably knew as well. The person who ordered Han's execution was Hee-ya, and his mother might have been murdered by her as well. The next morning, Hyun assigned her 2 colleagues to focus on investigating Chairman Jin's case first, while Isu would look into his mother's case 25 years ago. Jun Young went to see Chairman Jin's housekeeper to investigate whether anyone had entered the house on the day of the chairman's death. However, he didn't find any important clues. The housekeeper called Hee-ya to inform her that the police were at the house investigating. Immediately, her expression turned to worry and fear. Uncle Kim, who was helping the police investigate the case, deliberately rammed his car into Jung-ju's and used that as a reason to go to the repair shop. However, the memory card in the dashcam had been removed, so there was no more evidence. Hyun suspected that Chairman Jin's death was related to Jung-ju, but Uncle Kim wanted concrete evidence. That night, Jung-ju and Isu met to talk. Isu remembered the memory of the day his mother was murdered and said he would find the perpetrator and bring them to justice, and it was none other than Hee-ya, Jung-ju's mother. Immediately afterward, Jung-ju went to find Hee-ya, who was now in a state of panic. She asked him if he had been to see his father that night because she saw him leave the house at midnight. Jung-ju didn't answer, but looking at his expression, she guessed that he was the one behind Chairman Jin's death. He advised her to continue her drinking lifestyle, and he would take care of everything else. He would take over the Han-su group, as his mother desired. All of Jung-ju's negativity was instilled by his mother when he was a child. The scene shifted to the night Chairman Jin was in his villa in the woods. After Isu left, Jung-ju appeared. He knelt and apologized to Myung-chul, but everything had already been decided. It turned out that Myung-chul wanted to kick Jung-ju and his mother out. Letting them enter his house was the biggest mistake of his life. When Myung-chul left, Jung-ju put sleeping pills in his wine. When Myung-chul returned and didn't see Jung-ju, he took a sip of the wine. After that sip, the old man went to heaven to see naked chickens. The next day, the inauguration ceremony for the CEO of the Han-su group took place. Many reporters were present to get the scoop. The 2 brothers, Jung-ju and Isu, faced each other, their eyes filled with hatred. Before the inauguration ceremony, Isu and his colleagues discussed the case at the police station. All CCTV footage was destroyed, and the memory card from the car was missing. They could only confirm that the car had entered the villa, but they didn't know who was driving. Jun Young expressed his suspicion that Jung-ju was the one who murdered Chairman Jin, which angered Isu. Isu believed that it was Hee-ya's scheme, and Jung-ju was innocent. Hyun explained that Hee-ya didn't know how to drive, so she couldn't have been the perpetrator. Isu always trusted his brother Jung-ju, so he denied all the arguments. He would prove that Hee-ya was the culprit, starting with his mother's case from 25 years ago. That case was closed, but Isu didn't care and wanted to prove it. Meanwhile, Hyun's father, while reviewing his mother's case, suddenly found a clue that they had overlooked: 2 unidentified fingerprints of children. The next day, he and Captain Park went to the storage warehouse where old files were kept before computerization. After searching for a while, they found the evidence collected from that case. When they opened it, there were indeed fingerprints of 2 children, but they hadn't been scanned into the system at that time. With current technology, they could still be scanned. Captain Park told Hyun to send him any information. Isu went to the hospital to visit his stepmother and found that she had lost consciousness. The doctor said she wasn't eating or drinking and seemed to be avoiding reality. This happened after her son, Jung-ju, visited her the previous night. Later, Isu went to meet Hee-ya's driver at the address provided by Uncle Choi. He remembered clearly that the day Isu's mother died 25 years ago was also the day he was fired. He had driven Hee-ya to an address in a state of anger. She went inside for a few minutes and left immediately. She then went home and didn't go anywhere else. It was around 6 p.m., while his mother's time of death was 11 p.m. Another detail was that Hee-ya's son left the house that night. The driver offered to drive him, but he refused. He returned home with injuries, claiming it was a car accident, which is why the driver was fired. Meanwhile, Hyun's father contacted her about the new clue. He had sent the fingerprints of the children for identification and would notify her when he got the results. After receiving so many clues, Isu started to doubt that Jung-ju was as good as he thought. He called Uncle Choi to ask about the day his mother died and Jung-ju's accident. Uncle Choi confirmed that it happened but didn't remember the exact details. The next morning, Isu met Hyeon and told her the entire story about the driver, Hee-ya, and her alibi. He also mentioned that Jung-ju went out that night and had an accident. He asked Hyeon to look into it. Hyeon went to the emergency rescue team to investigate and received an unexpected result. She immediately called Isu to tell him that Jung-ju had an accident in the same area where he and his mother lived. Back at Jung-ju's inauguration ceremony at the Hansu Group, he gave a speech about what the company had been through and his future plans. When his speech ended, Isu confronted Jung-ju about his mother's death, asking if he had gone to see her that day. But Jung-ju denied it and even said he didn't know where Isu lived. He advised his brother to forget the past and live for the future. Isu returned to the police station and was surprised to see the fingerprint analysis results from his mother's case 25 years ago. Many fingerprints were identified, including Jung-ju's. There was no longer any doubt that Jung-ju was the one who murdered his mother. He immediately took action to apprehend the criminal, Jung-ju. Meanwhile, Uncle Choi disrupted the Hansu Group shareholder meeting to confront Jung-ju. He revealed that Chairman Jin's death was caused by Jung-ju and that his mother's death was also his doing, all to gain power. Jung-ju no longer hid his true nature. Later, Jung-ju received a call from the hospital, saying his mother had a problem. He arrived to find Hee-ya tied to the bed, having apparently cut her wrists, but luckily she was still alive. Uncle Choi informed Isu that Hee-ya had attempted suicide. She had an alibi in the case but still tried to kill herself, which meant she was trying to cover up her son's crime. Isu called Jung-ju to his house to talk. Hyeon returned to the station and noticed that the fingerprint files had been accessed. Knowing that it was Isu, she immediately called her team to find him before things escalated. At Isu's house, Jung-ju arrived to settle the score with his brother. Isu found Jung-ju's fingerprints in his own house, something the police had missed. He directly asked if Jung-ju was responsible for his mother's death. When Isu pointed a gun at him, Jung-ju recalled the past 25 years. His mother had attempted suicide after Myung-chul discovered his real son. He couldn't bear it and took a bottle of sleeping pills, then followed an address to Isu's house. He met Hee-ya's driver, as mentioned earlier, and took advantage of the situation when Isu's mother wasn't paying attention to slip sleeping pills into her water. When she drank the water and died from a drug overdose, Jung-ju staged the scene to look like a suicide. After leaving, he had an accident, as the driver had said. Back in the present, Jung-ju admitted to killing Isu's mother and dared him to shoot him. But Isu chose not to shoot him. Instead, he had a fistfight with Jung-ju to make things more dramatic. With his better physique, Isu punched his brother, making his nose bleed. But he stopped himself from killing him because he felt pity for him. He said he would take everything Jung-ju had. But as he was about to leave, Jung-ju grabbed a gun and pointed it at him. He continued to deny all his crimes. Isu told him something that would haunt him later. His father had known for a long time that he wasn't his biological son, but still chose to accept him and trust him and his mother. Jung-ju suddenly realized his mistake, but it was too late. He attempted suicide by pulling the trigger, but the gun was empty. Isu couldn't let his brother die so easily and forced him to live with this guilt for the rest of his life. After the fight ended, Hyeon's team arrived at the scene and handcuffed Jung-ju before taking him to the station. The next morning, Hyeon held a press conference to announce the results of the investigation into Chairman Jin's death and Isu's mother's case 25 years ago. Jung-ju was the culprit. Although the statute of limitations had passed, finding the perpetrator provided some comfort to the families of the victims. In the trial, Jung-ju was sentenced to life imprisonment. After everything was over, Isu was no longer a police officer but returned to his true identity as the son of the CEO of the Hansu Group. Hyeon's investigation team continued to investigate cases. As she was about to submit Isu's resignation letter, he suddenly appeared, surprising everyone. He had returned to work because he had made a wise decision at the inauguration ceremony. He gave the CEO position to the deserving person, Uncle Choi. Isu resumed his duties on the No. 1 investigation team and embarked on the next case.